Hi, my name is Simon Hedley, known to my clients and partners as a Strategic Alchemist and an ultimate connector. I'm a chartered accountant who brings together and bridges the worlds of business philosophy, finance, marketing, optimization, ontology, and so much more. Always focused on one thing, the simple idea that can make the difference to people and projects so we can tip the scales in their favor and get them complete. Pause, Stop, Reset is all about the three little words that can make the difference. They have for me and my clients, and I hope they will for you too. During the show, you'll get to learn about my guests' real-life experiences and the insights and lessons they've learned as they've navigated the resets in their personal and business lives, which you'll be able to leverage yourself. So let's start the show. Welcome back to today's episode of Pause, Stop, Reset. I'm Simon Hedley, and today I'm joined by the one and only Lindsey Frances. She is quite an interesting treasure. You're going to get to know and love her today. She's a sophrologist, a psychologist, a medical futurist, endurance athlete, a mother, and so many more things. My little time spent with her has already told me we're going to love getting to know each other, and I can't wait to introduce her to you today. So without further ado, Lindsey, welcome to Pause, Stop, Reset.
Thank you, Simon. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
And I'm really excited and intrigued because you've got this depth of experiences. We've got these sort of crossover connections. And yet I think many people may not know who you are yet, even though you're very well known in certain fields. So who is Lindsey and what are you up to today?
Well, I'm extremely well known in my local area because I run a sophrology clinic. So I'm an actual physical space owner, have been for a number of years, and love working with people through the medium of something called sophrology. And of course, that won't mean much to anybody that's in the English-speaking world.
Not a sausage whatsoever, yes.
I will explain. But if you were brought up in France, Spain, or Switzerland, you probably had a sophrologist at your school, in your sports team, perhaps for anxiety, preparation for performances, or childbirth. And it's a beautiful method that started in the 1950s, designed by a neuropsychiatrist for many, many reasons. And it's a great blended method of meditation, visualization, and breathwork. So what I do, Simon, is I couple that with my psychology experience, and I'm also a business consultant by trade. So I blend these methods together. I work with clients both one-to-one and in groups and corporately, and ultimately support leaders, founders, and entrepreneurs to be human beings and not human doings.
Love it. And as you say, we've got kindred souls on that, but I think you have a different flavor to it. And I already love how you've got this depth of interesting experiences in there. So like, never heard about this thing, and yet huge around the world, but not in the UK. And that's part of the fun of what we live in. Obviously, you must have lived then between the UK and France. But like, what are the big shifts and resets you've been through up till now?
Well, that's a great question because I didn't start out in this line of work. And I always recall the story of being a corporate female. I was working in leadership development. And as far as I was concerned, I was just a great big clever head dragging itself to work every day. And I had a little body attached to me that sometimes I fed it food and sometimes I didn't. Sometimes I polished it with some fancy outfits and some nice shoes. And I took it to the gym on a regular basis, but it wasn't really connected to my head. So I lived from a place of thinking I was terribly intelligent and important. And over the years, realized that that wasn't really going very well for me. So I had a revelation a number of years ago and suddenly realized I had this awesome body that also told me things, and I could live in two places, my mind and my body. And that started an exploration of consciousness into what I do now. And I cannot wait to share more widely with the world how important consciousness is, especially in the face of AI. It's the only thing, Simon, that really makes us human.
And so when did you move out to France then? How old are you when you shifted across?
We have been living in France now for 7 years, and we left the UK for a number of different reasons. My children have been educated here in France, and we live in a very rural area. We spend a lot of time in nature. And when you come away from a city, we were living in the southeast of England, very competitive. And as I say on many of my pieces of PR, I thought that the height of success was a Range Rover and a Chanel handbag. And well, it couldn't be further from the truth now.
It's two Range Rovers and two Chanel handbags. No, jokes.
Yes, and some Jimmy Choo shoes. But Now I can be found most days swimming in cold water, even if I have to break the ice to get in. As you mentioned, I'm a 70.3 Ironman athlete. I ride a road bike. I'm nearly 50, and life looks very different now from the way it looked 15 or 20 years ago.
No, completely. And that jump as well from the corporate space to working for yourself and building your own practice again, a lot more in there that we'll get into. I like to distinguish these sort of three aspecting of pausing, stopping, and resetting. And you get ontology, you get the being and doing stuff as well. Pausing for me is listening to the music, press a pause, have a break, and then go back to the music, nothing happens. Stopping is everything stops, momentum goes, and the reset is it's a brand new game, right? You wake up and we're moving to the Mars, we're moving somewhere else. Which of those do you find hardest, and why do you think that is?
Oh my gosh. Well, the pause is always going to be most complicated for everybody, including myself, in my opinion. We are so inundated with technology, information, and this bombardment of intel that just pausing in our daily life is incredibly complicated. And I think you remember, as well as I do, the days where you perhaps went to go on the bus and you didn't have a mobile phone in your pocket. And if your bag was big enough, you might have had a paperback book. But if you didn't, you simply sat and daydreamed. You naturally were taking a pause. Of course, what happens now? We're glued to our phones 24/7. Even if we're not, our brains are running at 1,000 miles an hour because the amount of data that is assaulting our subconscious is ginormous. So the pause for me is the most challenging part. And what's annoying when I tell my clients is that the pause has to be done every day. It's not just that you learn to pause or go on a retreat, or if you're very brave, you may have seen these dark room retreats that they're now starting all over the world, or silent retreats, which is obviously a much older practice. But it's not enough. You have to do that pause every single day.
Yeah, and we talk about how it's those moments when you don't think you can pause is usually when we don't most need to. And pausing can literally be a microsecond. It can be literally little bits. And so many people in business today, especially today with the recent interesting stuff happening at the geopolitical level, there's like, why did I say that? If I could just bit my tongue for 3 seconds more of that text. And I love the sort of ownership of that. And you're so true. Today, more than ever, there's always a text and an email and something else. And it's hard to actually have the ability to switch off. Very, very interesting. And where do you go to do that? Like, if you obviously get breath work as part of the things you've done. Is it a breath practice? Is it a go practice? What's your mechanism for going, give me a second, clients are fun? What's your...
Well, there's two parts to that answer, because where do I go? I go inside. And I didn't even realize I had an inside. I just thought I had a busy brain that I had to turn on or off. Now I know I can go inside. There's like a whole new playground of places to go. And the most important way to access that, of course, is through the breath. When we become aware of our breathing, subconscious process, we alter our state of consciousness and automatically become aware of what is subconscious. So in through the breath, and just that simple Vipassana practice of being aware of I am breathing in, I am breathing out is a great start. It's easy to do, Simon, but we don't do it. Do you?
I do more than most at times. And it's one of those things that one of my friends, Terry, you love Terry. He says, like, you remember, then you forget, then it's re-remembering. And there's always, oh yeah, remembering again. And I love that you brought it up. That bit of the simplest meditation is sort of, oh, I'm breathing in. Oh, I'm breathing out, without trying to change it, which is a very Western thing to do. It's like, must do it right now,
Yes, and people really struggle. What should I be doing, Lindsey? How should I be doing it? What also happens that people get very upset about is when they stop or pause and notice their breath, their body suddenly says, hang on a minute, what's going on? And it actually becomes a feeling of panic. It's the unknown. What's happening? So people then begin to feel tight in the chest. I can't breathe. I'm doing it wrong. We become unable to observe the process, but we're engaged in outcome. And that's when we most know that people in that situation are really struggling with their nervous system, very low heart rate variability, and really, really do need to, as you say, pause and then stop or reset as appropriate.
That practice of box breath, or how you labeled it, sort of the awareness of the breath, this has been around for a very long time. Like when I was growing up, it wasn't really talked about much. Now, many people talk about it, and yet it isn't really talked about and implemented and leveraged and used as much as we'd like, right? So it's 2025 as we're recording this. I began some of this stuff publicly in 2001, 2002. I'd have thought by now it would be done. Like everybody would know this. And I was working with some very smart young accountants. The firm shall remain nameless, Lindsey, for obvious reasons.
Of course.
Yes, no editing going on there at all. And they hadn't heard about box breath. Literally 1 out of 20 people knew it existed. And these are managers of very senior sort of projects. Why has it not gone out? Why has it not been marketed? Because it's sort of, it is, but it isn't simultaneously, you know?
I'm hoping that you're not realizing this is a trick question, of course, and I'm not going to start the conversation about big pharma because that will really
no, definitely not. No.
cause some irritation amongst listeners. But of course, people are always looking to buy or consume a product. And when we say, by the way, you already have everything you need and no, we can't sell you anything, it doesn't become as attractive as, please, can I spend £10 on these supplements? Will they make me feel better? And I, on a daily basis, deal with my clients who always say to me, Lindsey, what can I buy? How can I make myself feel better? Well, as I've talked about, you can't really buy your way out of this problem. You can't buy your way into your inner sanctuary. You have to work your way in. And I am surprised, Simon, that the number of people who spend hours and hours in the gym can't find 5 or 3 minutes a day to do any mindfulness or breath work. That to me is more baffling. We can talk about the consumer-driven life, and of course, we're wired and talked into consuming because that's what makes the economy go round. But this practice is so simple, and like you say, it's been around forever. But we have become so distracted and so consumer-focused that if we can't buy it or deliver it on Amazon, we simply don't seem to be interested anymore.
I love that answer. Not what I was expecting, or it wasn't a trick question either, by the way. Sometimes I'm sort of that simple Simon person going, you've missed the obvious here. I like that. That's interesting. Yeah, if they could package it and trademark it, then it would be done more, you know, that sort of thing.
Of course, and we do see it. I mean, I'm a massive fan of phototherapy patches and various supplements that I use, and I'm constantly tracking data. I own every piece of equipment under the sun, water filtration, grounding bed sheets, EMF machines. I mean, I've got it all. It drives my husband completely mad. I am an absolute consumer, and I like to think of myself as a bit of a human laboratory. But the reality is the biggest thing that makes a difference to my nervous system is feeling calm, safe, and secure. And the only way I can do that is by telling my body I'm fine, breathing slowly, reducing my heart rate, allowing my brain waves to settle, and being conscious of who I really am.
Yeah, and I think you maybe touched on it. Like, if you can listen to this podcast for a few minutes, some of what we're doing is encouraging you to take a pause, to reset. But so many people are stuck in that panicky treadwheel because actually the environment they're in is also quite stressful, right? They set up sort of a system problem. Getting a bit heavy for today's call, but that's okay. We like that. That's okay. If you could send back through time and space to the younger Lindsey, I don't know whether you're 8, 10, 15 years old, what's sort of the wisdom nugget you wish you could send back? I'm sure you have done with clever therapy processes, but what do you wish you could let her really know and believe in?
Yes, there is a wonderful practice as part of sophrology, which does deal with the inner child, and it's an advanced practice. So, of course, I've done it many times. The one thing that I would say that has been one of the biggest revelations for me was a feeling of being lonely as a child. And I came to realize as an adult that it wasn't being lonely, it was being slightly different. And I've been asking myself since I was about 7, who am I and who are you? And it's been on my consciousness ever since. I'm absolutely fascinated, in fact, obsessed with human behavior. Why do people do what they do? Why do they behave in the way they do? What happens in their subconscious? What's happened in their evolution? What's happened in their lives? So when I did the work on my inner child, I realized that I wasn't lonely. I was just alone. And that's okay, because we need to be alone to learn to be with ourselves. And I think that really is the thing I would say most to anybody that knows when I say this, that they don't like being on their own, that when you learn to be with yourself, it's the most fulfilling relationship you can ever have.
I love that insight. It's definitely one that I've danced with over the years. There's been those times on desert islands, blissful, This is great. There's nobody around for miles. And there's times when you need connection. And even worse, you're on the tube, central London, thousands of people, but you're alone. That distinction of loneliness and alone time. And there's nothing better, I find now, than being in nature, being grounded, or anywhere at all on the inner and just really okay. And sometimes it gets jiggled and jaggled and wiggled around by stuff, right? So love that. Really interesting. And I think it's one that many people, if you're listening in a non-optimal relationship, put it that in life or business, I think when we can come from that place of I'm handled, I know myself, and then go into it. And it's such a rare thing. It shouldn't be, but it seems to be in the modern world. People that have sort of come to that conclusion you touched on.
Absolutely. And I also do a lot of work with people on how they speak to themselves. And I think it's very important to realize that we should be speaking to ourselves as if we were reparenting ourselves. And we should be speaking kindly and encouragingly to ourselves in the same way that we would speak to anybody else. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Well, if you can't be kind and nice to yourself, then I'm afraid you can't be kind and nice really to anybody. So I would remind everybody to check in with themselves when you look in the mirror. Can you say, God, well done. You're really doing well. You're really making an effort. Good job, looking great, being loving, or whatever compliment you want to give yourself, because people simply don't seem to be able to do it.
Yeah, and whether it's with Lindsey or if you like Nancy Swisher and others, that inner bonding child therapy work, really interesting that you can start to become the parent you never had, no matter what your childhood was. Just be nice. Sugar and ice cream pizza isn't always the answer, right? That's a lot of that goes on sometimes. I'm joking a little bit there. It's I never got pizzas as a kid, and I have 10 a day. Like that's not the advice I'm recommending, but that's your choice. I'm a big believer, and I found that books and movies have helped me on these resets. Watching their lives, seeing the stories, getting insights and ideas I can play with, that human potential, like, oh, they've done that. Can I apply that stuff that goes on? Are there any books and movies that have really helped you on your journey?
Absolutely. The book that comes to mind straight away is Michael Singer's Untethered Soul. It's the most beautiful articulation of what it means to live open-heartedly. It's also an extremely challenging book because you have to read it really slowly.
I've not finished it yet. It's on my list.
That's right.
I've got a copy and I've not read it, and I started it. And Mark Nepo's work as well. You know Mark Nepo? Very similar, challenging, wonderfully lovely work. But also it's not like this is easy and simple. It requires you to be with it and think with it. And a great
really challenging. But I do, if you've started it, you know the principle, and you know yourself when you're not being open-hearted to yourself or other people, and you can say vibrating low or being negative or doing whatever, you can feel it. And then when you feel it, now what do I do?
Cold and sharp, and it goes, it's like, I don't like this.
It's a horrid place. No one wants to live like that, but we do. From scarcity, from fear, especially at the moment, Simon, massive subconscious psychological insecurity going on. And, people say to me, oh, I'm fine. We're not. Unfortunately, we're in massive times of change, and technology is advancing very, very rapidly. And as I said to you, AI is a threat to all of us, even if we think it isn't. It is like the Industrial Revolution. Things are changing, and those of us that are aware and conscious will weather the storm much better.
Mm-hmm. I like to occasionally sprinkle some bits into hidden conversations, hidden in plain sight, hidden by order, as my friends used to say. People assume that what they're hearing about in the news is what's available, and often public tech is a decade or more behind actually the modern tech. Part of my fascination, we touched on at the start, I've been around a lot of stuff that isn't public, that I can't talk about. Well, I can, but not supposed to. And if you know where things are going and how the dots fit together, like, wait a minute, so-and-so, and So it's a really interesting time. On my other pronoic side is possibly there might already be a very, very, very smart AI that's been here a very, very long time. And, does it serve us? And the fear mindset is so easy to slip into, especially because it's how most of human marketing is driven by FOMO, fear of missing out. So it's like, you haven't got a red shiny thing. You need a red shiny thing. Oh, it encourages that buying. Whereas if you don't actually need anything because you're cool and handled, then nothing happens. And so it wants a fear environment to be controlled and managed and predicted.
That's right. And we're back to evolutionary psychology. Unless we're part of the tribe, we're dead. You're left in the wilderness and you'll be eaten by the wolves. So, of course, if everybody's got the red shiny thing, you need to get it too, or you might be on the outside. And I hear women especially talk about imposter syndrome. I see men behave in a very tribal way because ultimately that's how we're designed. And I think when we just get a handle on those basics and we begin to see why we get FOMO and we begin to see how we get manipulated and how our children are, so desperate to be involved in all of these Snapchat streaks or whatever else they're doing or whatever's current. I don't even know what they're up to half the time because I can't see it. It's like parenting in the dark with your hands tied behind your back. But that's probably for another podcast, another time.
That was almost too quick for me to catch that. I love that. That's very good. No, and it's so true. It is so true. And it's also one of the interesting things you touched on there, right? Let's go there, given your rich groundedness in this. We live in a world where cancel culture, being not part of the tribe online, not part of the cool kids group that are all supporting each other, the successful ones. How do people speak out? How do they not sort of get into the sort of right-wrong duality stuff? How can they go, well, actually, that's not the whole story, without rocking that boat? Or maybe they need to, because what I see is more and more of the same sort of echo chambers going on. And, publicly, it looks like one thing. Behind the scenes, there's payments and syndicates and a lot of poor form being shared. And most of us, and I'll hand on heart, I'm guilty of this. I go, if I tell them what I actually think, one, they won't like it. Number two, nobody will listen or care because where's your Ferrari, to quote my friend's book. It's like, well, when you've got $1 billion and more than Elon, then you can talk about it. Now, Elon's a very interesting character, not about Elon Musk particularly. So how does somebody navigate, right, with both wanting to have a voice, but also keep real to themselves? And in a world where generally most people, like 99%, they're not getting any traction. They're not getting awareness. How do they be with that imposter syndrome you touched on, the sort of in your hinting world?
There's a huge conversation there, Simon, but authenticity and identity, gifts and talents is probably where I'd start answering that question, because when we really know who we are and we're authentic in who we are, because we actually understand the uniqueness with which we were born with and the experiences which we've genuinely accrued, we can operate from a very, very strong place of knowing and security. And when I express an opinion that may be not popular, especially if I'm talking to a teenager, I do caveat it with the fact that, this is my opinion, given that I am gifted or talented in this way. And that's a funny word as well, and given my experience and I'm being genuinely authentic. I'm not saying you can't disagree with me, but when we come to the table rooted in who we really are and really aware of the path that we've traveled, we can present so much more of a strong and secure and safe position. And we see it a lot in relationships where you're not able to articulate what you really want or need. You're actually quite unsafe because nobody ever knows how to please you. Of course, being overly demanding is the opposite end of the spectrum there.
Yeah.
But this drive to be authentic, and we see it online, we have no idea how authentic people are until we sit down and have a conversation like this. Hopefully we have a coffee or a beer at some point. You get to know each other. You know some people that I know some people that you know. That's when we begin to feel safe and secure. But it is incredibly complicated. And to go back to your question about imposter syndrome, when we realize that we all have imposter syndrome because we're meant to be in a tribe, we're meant to be living with 150 people and staying with our parents and our kids and our family, that's how we're designed, we're bound to have imposter syndrome. So we come back and really question ourselves. Okay, so I'm going into this room. Am I truly unsafe? Am I truly going to get eaten by wolves? No, not really. Okay, it's just an evolutionary reaction. Do I have the authority to be here? Yes. Have I walked the path to get here? Yes. Do I know what I'm talking about? Yes. Thank you very much. Off we go.
Yeah, no, very, very, very true. And I think that sort of real fear versus imagined fear. And I know you've got leadership training as well, right? Helping sort of those leaders step up. Some of that is being willing to go, I disagree, and find a way to do that in a way which isn't right or wrong. The Rumi quote, my favorite ones, live like the space beyond right or wrong will meet you there. And it's such an interesting bit where you can get into what's the insight, what's the value, where's the plug and pray. And I think the more you're doing your own thing, it doesn't really matter. If I liked my lunch from what I'm doing today, what you had for lunch is your business. It doesn't really need to bother me what I had for my lunch, as long as we've all had some food and been sharing it at some level. It's my sort of collective northerner.
Absolutely. But I think we've actually forgotten what we do like and what we don't like. And when I say to people, okay, so we're coming to the end of the day, what was the thing that you really enjoyed most? What gave you the most joy today? and they're scrolling through, did I buy something? Did I go somewhere? Did I do something? Did you have any nice glasses of water? Did you have a nice cup of tea that you made yourself? We're not talking about a fancy latte for £6.50.
For those that can't see the video, I'm holding up my "You're All Right, You Are" cup that I've got with a hot drink in it. Yeah.
I mean, you've got to find your joy in the smallest of things. Was there hot water in the tap this morning when you woke up? Yes, great. Were the birds singing? I didn't notice. Was the sun shining just a little bit? Let's go back to basics here and really dial into daily joy, because that's really what's important, not the Ferrari or the end goal, because at the end of the day, when we're dead, we're dead.
Yeah, and you listen to the Jodie podcast. It's probably what I loved about her. She has a realness to it. This isn't a therapy session. Like for me, I had my sigmoid colon cut out 1.5 years ago. I had the experience of I could not walk 5 feet for months. Now I can walk around the park. I can do other things. That real gratitude for the moment. One of my school friends passed away 2 weeks ago, my age, and it's like, I'm here. Cool. The things that matter shift and change. And have you ever been to Hawaii yet, to Maui? There's a fun story about Maui for if you haven't.
No, I haven't.
Beautiful place, magical place. There's an amazing raging road called the Road to Hana. Everybody goes on the Road to Hana. Crazy road, very small, wiggly. At the end are the 7 serene pools. I think that's what they call them. It sounds magical, right? These divine pools of serenity. It's branding. Somebody went, no one's coming. We'll call it this. So people would go there. And when you get there, you're like, oh, is that why I'm here? Now, if you love the pools, it's not about the pools, but it's that bit of we forget what's important. We forget why we wanted it. And we get caught up in that noise, forgetting those simple moments. I'm here in the UK, and this Sunday just gone, it was glorious. It was one of those days you're like, where has this come from? This is amazing. What was the cost to be in the park? Zip. But having being out there and being open to be out there is really good. So I really love that. We need to go into what the experience was, but when you think about one of your hardest dark nights of the soul moments, right? Those bits that were like, I can't get through this, whatever that may be, what helped you navigate it, right? Because I know for me, just by all the tools, it's not enough for myself at times, right? So what helped you navigate those really challenging resets?
I don't think when I went through my own awakening, my own dark night of the soul, I had any tools, Simon. I think I was toolless. So when it happened to me and I hit my own personal, what I would consider rock bottom, and of course it may happen again, I had no tools. So I had to really think about, what do I do here? It's a sort of do or die situation. And I can either give in and just sink lower and lower, or I can think, actually, I think I might have some control. I might be able to find a solution. I am a big believer in a higher power. And when I realized that I wasn't the be all and end all in the universe, and there was actually something bigger than me, outside of me, but also inside, everything changed. And it's a really, really difficult conversation. If you haven't read the work by Dr. Lisa Miller, she talks about the incredible neuroprotective benefits of non-religious spirituality. And just by dialing into, I am not the biggest thing in the world, has been so incredibly helpful to me, especially when you're out in nature. All of those trees and mountains will still be here when you're dead. And you told the story just now about your friend who unfortunately has passed away. When we do really face death properly, and we really do realize that this is not eternal, everything is temporary, you become much, much more aware of how important every moment is. And I don't mean, what should I do tomorrow? I mustn't waste a minute. But right here, right now, having this conversation with you is an absolute blessing. I'm enjoying every minute of it. It's so nice to connect with somebody else who's talking the same sort of language, and that we're going out into the world and saying to other people, you too can wake up, and your day, no matter what your circumstances, can be a little bit better when you reframe it. Isn't that enough for today?
Yeah, and it's the hardest thing when people are in the do space and they don't get, if you could just stop for a bit, just really stop. It might be one conversation that goes a bit different, and another, and suddenly everything changes. Navigating those different waves and opportunities, but that centered bit. And it's, I think one of the big things of our next probably 3, 4, 5 decades is the integration of the idea of nonlinear time and linear time. right? There's sort of this understanding of both. We've all had where like an hour can be 400,000 lifetimes and an hour can be dunk. It's like, where'd it go? And this fascinating experience of our lives and what's real and what's not as we step more into AI and holographics and technology, especially where if it goes where I think it could go, where we have agenting AI and machine learning and other systems, where if you have that clarity of, I would love to create this or connect with that, it could happen at a scale we've never really had possible before for most people, right?
Yes.
You know, when you and I were growing up, I could not go and do a TV show at will with a lovely lady in France and go online, record a thing and make it live. But now I can. And the cost is electrics and Wi-Fi, which is fascinating. We're an interesting time of technology and creativity shifting and coming together. And I don't know Dr. Lisa's work at all, though. One thing I love about the show is coming across these little nuggets and going, I have no idea about. Do you know her personally or just sort of come across her work or?
No, I came across her work through a contact of mine that does know her. And particularly in the parenting space, she does an awful lot of research that's published about how important it is for children to understand that they aren't just the center of the universe. And of course, with aging becoming quite unpopular, wisdom and age not having the same sort of credibility or desirability it had perhaps 50 years ago, things are changing, and it builds also on the work of Dr. Gabor Mate. And she is a credible researcher who's been talking about how important non-religious spirituality is in terms of mental health. It's well worth reading, and I can't recommend it enough. Again, not an easy read. Unfortunately, she doesn't seem to have the publicity in the same way that researcher Brené Brown does yet. But I'll keep praying for that because she is quite a phenomenal.
And this is part of the game, right? As more of us get the basics, we can start to share and scale. And I have a sense you're like Professor Lindsey as well. You could probably go more sciencey than me. I've got some stuff, but I sort of tap out and go, give me the 1-page checklist. I don't want the deep research. Somebody else do that. I'm cheating slightly, but no, it's quite amazing how much is there now. And also, it isn't a thing you can just sort of pick up over half an hour. It's going deep into it. And you're already touching on, if you're listening in, whether you're a parent or not a parent, there's value to get in here. And you'll learn right out of Lindsey and her work later on in the show. One thing I think people come to the show for is a couple of things. They're either going through times that they need to reset, like it isn't going well, help. The plane is crashing, help. Or they're okay, actually. Many of our listeners are doing really well. Life is good/great, but it's not like, how do I, you know what I mean? Like, been there, done that, got the t-shirt, right? You had lunch at the Shard 1,500 times, kind of bored now. What else is there? So what's your sort of insight, wisdom? They're talking to their friends. I heard Lindsey yesterday. What's your sort of thing that will help them shift and reset, do you think, from your work?
I think looking for that feeling of contentment and satisfaction and fulfillment, they're three very different words. They're three very different emotions. If you can honestly go to bed at night, put your hand on your heart and say, I am deeply fulfilled, content and satisfied. I understand what peace and serenity feels like, then that's great. But in my experience, very few of us have that ability. If you go to bed at night and think, not really sure, what I would urge people to do always is think about how they feel, not what they want. And we talk about emotional granularity a lot in sophrology, and we always ask people, how do you feel? And then how do you want to feel? When we can really get hold of what it is I want to feel, and whether that's feeling satisfied, energized, confident, but we really understand the depth of those emotions, we can move towards creating them. You know as well as I do, Simon, that what you focus on, you move towards. And I'm a big skier. If somebody is skiing beneath you and they look at you, they will ski into you. What you focus on, you move towards. So if you are focusing on the fact that you're grumpy, you don't like your friends, you don't like your house, you don't like the weather, you've got an annoying cat or whatever, you're just going to get more of the same. Whereas if you wake up tomorrow morning and say, today I really would like to feel content, serene and peaceful, you will ultimately be able to create more of that. And we can talk about manifesting and we can go down all sorts of rabbit holes. But that would be my first tip for people. Just take a moment to think, how do you really want to feel? And I always point people towards the emotions wheel, widely available on the internet. It's all of those emotions that have got names to them. Just test yourself. Do you know what all of those emotions feel like? Or do you only have two modes, fast or asleep? Chasing the dopamine or bored? Because what I also see happens all the time, and this is also very complicated for people who are neurodiverse, is peace and serenity feels like boredom. It's a bit like fear and excitement. They're very close together energetically. And people say to me, I'm bored. You're not. You're just entering serenity. And that in itself is a fascinating thing to unpack with clients.
What is serenity when you say that? And I need to say, because Terry, with the work I've been doing with him, that's one of his things. It's like there's calm, there's peace, and this serenity thing, the different. I'm not the one to distinguish it today, but I've had moments of it and it's lovely, but I can't explain it. But essentially you might have a way of describing serenity, because I do agree with you. Peace, calm, they're all sort of collapsed together and they're not the same thing at all.
When you were talking, and I'm a great one for images, the image of candy floss came to mind. It's a bit like sugar, granulated sugar might be like peace, but if you whip it up into candy floss and it's suddenly expansive, that's serenity. It's got a different quality to it. It's very similar, but it's got a bigger, more expansive, multi-dimensional feeling.
I love it. I like it. And that's part of the inquiry, by the way. This sort of distinguishing feeling tones can feel very like sort of navel gazing, but it really isn't. It gives you a sort of space to sort of start to unpack the inner worlds. I don't normally ask this, but I have a sense you might have a sense if everything worked to plan in the universe and all the work, that was good, the pure form stuff that works could be shared out, what do you see possible for our children, our children's children, the next sort of 20, 50 years, right? If these ideas of breath and pausing, Dr. Lisa's work and others, if it was all out there, what do you see as our sort of possible future? Are we going to keep repeating again and again the hamster wheel of humanity, or is there something new emerging?
Oh, that's such an incredibly complicated and exciting question. I think if we were living in peace and harmony with each other, we'd be living on a different plane of consciousness. And I'm sure you know as well as I do that what we see, think, and feel isn't really the end. There's a whole other world out there that we're not even engaging with. And we can talk about different planes and dimensions, but I think we would live somewhere that was very different. It would feel very different, and we would be behaving in a very different way. We would be much, much more conscious and able to connect with each other. Communication would be a completely different experience. We really would be in really a heavenly harmony.
Yeah, and there's still this aspect of the mortality. I don't think we transcend that in the short term. I think it may shift. And I think communication is really fascinating. Have you ever heard the line, the biggest error in communication, I think there's been any? It's one of those, like, I hate it, but it's so true. And there's this sort of space of non-verbal, real grounded communication. Again, I'm sort of seeding your Maui trip for you and your husband in the future. Have you swum with sea turtles yet? Have you had that experience?
Yes, I have, in the Caribbean.
And you're like, they're not talking, but you're talking. There's something going on. And they're also like, I'm cool now. Bye.
They're my favorite kind of friendships, actually, Simon. You and I like a chat. We're both super chatty people. But those moments where you're just like, you're just like in it. You know those bits.
I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And it's a really special time when you can connect with people like that, especially if you are a super chatty type. And I like to think of one of my gifts and talents as being talking, which is lucky for me because of the work I do. But I've got a daughter that doesn't have the gift of talent of talking. She does other things. And when we get that like non-verbal sinking, it's awesome. Sinking as in not sinking to the bottom of the sea.
And you've actually got this. It's also funny. We have a thing called the talking group, and the actual first lesson in the talking group is to listen. So you actually listen more than you talk, pretending you're not listening, but you're listening very deeply, literally deeply listening. Right now in the moment, no, I'm kidding. But Paul McKenna for you. I love Paul. So it's a bit of fun. We're going to wrap up the show in just a few minutes. Is there anything we haven't asked you, we should have asked you, could have asked you, would love to talk about before we sort of go? Is there anything that like, I wish I'd shared that, or is there anything you sort of wish the world could know from Lindsey today?
Yes, I'd really like everybody to wake up to being conscious and stop being dry bones and dead fish. It's not going well, and we really need to understand that we are a mind and a body, that we are physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And if you don't know what that means, please go and do some work on understanding it, because it will change your entire life. And if you're in a leadership position, leaders cast shadows. You really should be working on yourself to make sure that the shadows you cast for other people are warm and comfortable, and not dark and ego-driven.
I love that. I'm sure people listening in will go, I want to learn more about Lindsey Frances. Where do they go? I know it's lindseyfrances.co.uk.
LinkedIn is a good hangout for me, Lindsey Frances. I also have my own podcast, Rich Simple Human, and you can find me on my website. And of course, Simon, we're now connected. So the two of us, we'll see what happens.
Yes, you can always go, Simon, introduce me to Lindsay. I go, sure, no problem. By the way, what you've just given away is the entire game. Nobody ever really gets that in 20 years of playing Relationship Capital Firm, right? They'll go, you know, so and so. It's like, yes, I'd love to meet them. You're like, yes. And they never go, can I meet them? And you're like, sure, why? And they go, I don't know. And you're like, okay, when you do, let me know. And it's sort of funny how that world works of we're all hyper connected today, but not actually connecting it. We are. And or even worse is you think you're introducing people, but they've already got 1,000, like, yeah, we already know each other the last 25 years, we're best friends. Like, oh, okay. It's kind of fun.
That's lovely when that happens. And,
it is.
And again, back to the evolutionary psychology, it's really important that we are part of a tribe. And we do end up in our own weird echo chambers. And also believing those weird marketing whizzes that keep appearing on my Instagram feed, 6 days to 6 figures in your business. None of it's true.
Well, you can if you spend 200 grand on it.
Oh, yeah. We're back into multi-level marketing, aren't we?
Yes.
Then?
Yeah. Terrible, I think. Terrible things. And it's also quite fascinating. I mean, like, I guess one question for us, and this is a bit cheeky one. If one of your new clients signed up with you, what's sort of the first thing you always do with a client? Is there kind of, we always start there? Is there a key lesson they need to get to?
Well, I'm going to rubber stamp your own method here because the first pillar of my 5-pillar method is pause. In fact, it's pause, presence, power, people, purpose, plans. That's 6, not 5. I've just added 1. And underpinning that is the 5 pillars of well-being: nutrition, hydration, exercise, relaxation, recovery, and purpose. So, Simon, we are in the same place. Pause, 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 pause.
And with that, it is time to take a pause. Go have some water, smile, take some notes. You can listen back to this. Do connect with Lindsay. She's a lot of fun. And I look forward to seeing what you do with your new insights as you start to wake up, as she so beautifully said. Thanks for listening. That was today's episode of Pause, Stop, Reset. And we'll see you next time. Once again, I'm Simon Hedley. Thank you for listening to this episode of Pause, Stop, Reset, which is brought to you by the team at simonx.com and published by thesimpleidea.com. So you get maximum value and to access all the bonuses and gifts, make sure to head to pause.reset.com, register and explore the portal. And if you're looking for great people, check out onesmartnetwork.com. If you've enjoyed the show, do give us a positive review, subscribe, and share this episode with friends. I can't wait to share our next episode with you. Till then, remember you can always choose to pause, stop, reset.